The waitress who refused to serve wine to a teenager, unaware that the quiet man in the corner was a grieving billionaire looking for a reason to believe in humanity again. "Just get me the damn wine, you useless girl." The rain hammered down on the glass roof of the diner like 1,000 desperate fists, relentless and wild, each drop a tiny shattering against the fragile barrier between the biting cold outside and the warm warmth within. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and fried food, a smell Alara Vance associated with the unending exhaustion that had become the very fabric of her existence. She was a ghost in a threadbare uniform. Alara moved between the cracked vinyl booths with a quiet dignity, her step steady even as a desperate weariness pulled at every muscle, a weariness born from too many double shifts and too few hours of sleep. Her face, pale under the flickering fluorescent lights, was a mask of serene professionalism, but her eyes, deep and haunted, told a different story, a story of overdue rent notices tacked to a peeling apartment door, of the soft, rasping cough of her little boy, Leo, that echoed in the sterile silence of their tiny room, and of the hollow space in her heart that her late husband used to fill. She was drowning. In another part of the city, a different kind of rain, a more expensive and desolate rain, slid down the cavernous, floor-to-ceiling windows of a stately mansion that felt more like a mausoleum. Alistair Sterling stood in the oppressive, polished darkness, the only light coming from the cold, distant flashes of lightning that illuminated the vast, high-ceiling living room for a split second before darkness swallowed it whole, revealing ornate furniture draped in white sheets like sleeping specters. He held a small, silver-framed photograph in his hand, the cool metal a stark contrast to the unbearable heat of his grief, a grief so profound it had become a physical presence in the room, a heavy fog that choked the air and muted all sound. His own reflection stared back at him from the gleaming glass, a gaunt, hollow man whose expensive suit hung on him like a costume for a life he no longer lived. His heart, once a source of commanding power and decisive action, was now just a shattered, brittle thing, thudding away in the cavernous emptiness of his chest. It had been 2 years since the screech of tires, 2 years since the splintered sound of impact, 2 years since a drunk teenager, served illegally at a fine restaurant, had stolen the light from his world, taking his wife, Amelia, and his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. He vanished. Tonight, the silence was too loud, the memories too sharp. He needed noise, life, something to break the relentless rhythm of his sorrow. He put down the sacred photograph, the image of their innocent smiles a fresh wound, and walked to his sprawling closet. He ignored the rows of impeccable, crisp suits and chose a worn pair of jeans and a simple, gray sweater, a disguise to blend into the world he no longer felt a part of. He needed to see if there was anything left out there worth seeing. He needed a sign. Total silence. Ilara's feet throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, a rhythm that matched the relentless pounding of the rain against the diner's windows as she refilled a coffee cup for the third time for a trucker hunched over the counter. Each movement was an exercise in quiet resolve, pushing past the pain in her body and the louder, more desperate pain in her soul, focusing only on the task at hand, a gentle smile, a steady hand, another few dollars toward the mountain of debt that threatened to consume her and Leo. Into this symphony of quiet desperation strode a discordant note. A woman, draped in a coat that cost more than Alara made in 6 months, swept in with an air of brittle entitlement, a teenage boy trailing in her wake with a bored, arrogant smirk plastered on his face. They chose the best booth, the one by the window that was usually reserved for families, and the woman, Mrs. Delacroix, snapped her fingers to get Alara's attention, the sound sharp and offensive in the otherwise soft hush of the diner. Alara approached, her notepad and a small, sincere smile at the ready. "What can I get for you this evening?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. Mrs. Delacroix didn't even look at her, her eyes scanning the menu with disdain. "We'll have 2 of the lobster specials. And a bottle of the Chateau Margaux," she declared, gesturing dismissively toward her son, Julian. "He's had a trying week at boarding school." Ilara's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. She glanced at the boy, who looked no older than 16, his youthful face a mask of smug privilege. She knew the law. More than that, she felt a deep, unshakable conviction in her core, a moral compass that had guided her through every storm. She cleared her throat gently. "I am so sorry, ma'am," she began, her tone polite but firm. "The lobster is an excellent choice. However, I will need to see some identification for the young man if you're ordering wine." The request hung in the air, simple and professional. Mrs. Delacroix's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing into icy slits. "Excuse me," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Julian snickered, leaning back in the booth. "Just get me the damn wine, you useless girl." The words were a slap, designed to humiliate, to put her in her place. Elara felt a tremor run through her, the fear of losing her job a biting cold in her stomach. She needed this job. She needed it more than air. But as she looked at the boy's sneering face, she saw not just a spoiled teenager, but a potential weapon, a tragedy waiting to happen. The thought of her own Leo, so fragile and innocent, strengthened her resolve. She met Mrs. Delacroix's furious gaze, her own eyes unwavering. "Ma'am, it is against the law for me to serve alcohol to a minor. It is a responsibility I take very seriously. I cannot, and I will not, break that law for you or for anyone." Her voice did not crack. It was quiet, but it was made of steel. In a dark corner booth, hidden in the shadows, Alistair Sterling, the man who had ordered only a cup of black tea and hadn't touched it, froze. He had been watching, a detached observer of this small human drama, but Elara's word struck him with the force of a physical blow. Her quiet, unflinching integrity in the face of such blatant intimidation was a flicker of pure, golden light in the suffocating darkness of his own cynicism. He watched as her simple, selfless act of moral courage, an act that was clearly costing her, reawakened something in him, a part of his heart he thought had died on that rain-slicked road 2 years ago. A profound, life-altering impact. Mrs. Delacroix, incensed, threw a wad of cash onto the table. "This is absurd. I will have your job for this. You will be begging on the streets by tomorrow." She grabbed her son and stormed out of the diner, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Elara stood there, trembling, her face pale, the weight of the threat crashing down on her. Her manager rushed over, his face a mixture of fear and apology. She knew what was coming. Alistair watched her for a moment longer, his gaze filled with a raw, unspoken awe. He stood, walked to the counter, and placed several crisp $100 bills down. He then scribbled a few words on a napkin and placed it beside the money before slipping out into the relentless rain, his purpose renewed. When the chaos subsided, Elara found the napkin. It read, in strong, elegant script, "Thank you for your integrity." She was gone. The inevitable phone call came the next morning, the voice of her manager, Mr. Henderson, thin and apologetic on the other end of the line, the words tumbling out in a nervous rush that did little to soften the blow. The rain had stopped, but a heavy fog had descended upon the city, mirroring the suffocating despair that was closing in on Elara. Mr. Henderson explained that Mrs. Delacroix was a prominent figure, a major investor in the restaurant chain's parent company, and that his hands were tied, that he was truly sorry, but he had to let her go. He told her she could pick up her final paycheck that afternoon. The click of the phone ending the call echoed in the small, silent apartment with a dreadful finality. Elara sank onto her worn sofa, the springs groaning in protest, and stared at the eviction notice on her small kitchen table, its red letters seeming to pulse with a malevolent energy. Leo coughed in his sleep from the other room, a fragile, rattling sound that splintered her heart into 1,000 pieces. She had done the right thing, she knew she had, but the right thing had cost her everything. A quiet resolve settled over her despair. She would not break. For Leo, she would be strong. She put on her thin coat, the fabric threadbare at the cuffs, and walked through the biting cold to the diner to collect her meager final earnings, each step a testament to her dignified, silent suffering. She felt the hollow ache of failure, the bitter taste of injustice. The world felt like a cruel, transactional place, where integrity was a liability, and goodness was punished. She was alone. Meanwhile, across the city, Alistair Sterling was a man transformed. The hollow, haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by a sharp, commanding focus, an intensity that had his personal assistant, Arthur, standing at rapt attention. The sight of that waitress, her unwavering stance a beacon of light, had given him a new purpose. It was a seismic shift. He had spent 2 years marinating in his grief, a passive victim of a cruel world. Now, he would be an agent of change, a hidden force for good. "Arthur," he said, his voice crisp and clear, devoid of the weary rasp it had held for so long. "I need you to find someone for me. A waitress. Her name is Alara Vance. She was just fired from the Oakwood Diner on 5th Street. I want to know everything." Arthur, a man of impeccable discretion and efficiency, simply nodded. "Consider it done, Mr. Sterling." Within hours, a sleek, polished report lay on Alistair's ornate desk. It detailed Alara's entire life of hardship, the tragic death of her husband from a sudden aneurysm, her mounting medical and student loan debts, her son's chronic asthma, the looming eviction, and her unjust termination. Each line of text was a fresh stab to Alistair's newly reawakened heart. He saw in her story a parallel to his own suffering, a good person crushed by the random cruelty of fate. But unlike him, she had not retreated into a shell of cynicism. She had faced her despair with a gentle, selfless courage. He saw Amelia's strength in her. He saw Lily's innocence in her motivation. He knew then what he had to do. He would not simply help her. He would become her guardian angel, her hidden savior. He would repay her act of integrity 1,000-fold, using his immense wealth as a tool to restore the balance the world had so cruelly tipped. His grief, once a destructive force, would now be the fuel for a quiet, powerful redemption. He looked at the picture of his wife and daughter, his eyes glistening. "This is for you," he whispered to them. He felt a profound connection. Alara returned to her apartment, the small envelope containing her last paycheck feeling impossibly light in her trembling hands. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. She sat at her small table, spreadsheets of her debts swimming before her weary eyes, the numbers mocking her. As she buried her face in her hands, a sob catching in her throat, she heard a soft slip of paper from under her front door. She froze. Her heart thudded wildly, a mix of fear and curiosity. Landlords didn't slip things quietly. Hesitantly, she went to the door and picked up the plain white envelope. There was no name, no return address. Inside, she found a stack of crisp $100 bills, far more than enough to cover the next 3 months' rent and all of Leo's expensive medications. Tucked within the bills was a small, typed note. It simply said, "For your integrity." From a friend. Disbelief washed over her, so potent it made her dizzy. She counted the money 3 times, her fingers fumbling. It was real. It was a miracle. A wave of cathartic relief so powerful it brought her to her knees swept through her, and for the first time in months, she wept not from despair, but from a fragile, overwhelming gratitude. She didn't know who it was from, but she clutched the note to her chest as if it were a sacred object. Her act of kindness had not been in vain. The world wasn't entirely dark. A small sliver of hope had pierced through the heavy fog. The next day, another miracle occurred. The phone rang, and a warm, professional voice from the city's most prestigious pediatric pulmonology clinic informed her that an anonymous benefactor had established a fund to cover all of Leo's medical care, indefinitely. The woman on the phone explained that they had an opening with Dr. Albright, the best specialist in the state, that very afternoon. Alara was speechless, a hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. This was impossible. It felt like a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream she was terrified of waking up from. That afternoon, as Dr. Albright examined a cheerful Leo, whose breathing already seemed less labored with the new inhaler, Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt since before her husband had passed. A few days later, just as her cupboards were growing bare, a delivery truck pulled up to her building. 2 men carried box after box of groceries into her apartment, fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, pasta, everything a growing boy could need. The receipt, left on the counter, was marked, paid in full, with another small note attached, "A pure heart should never know hunger." Elara was overwhelmed, her mind racing to find an explanation. The man from the diner? The one who had left the generous tip and the kind note? It seemed impossible. Why would a stranger do all of this? She felt a sense of being watched over, protected by an unseen force. It was both unsettling and profoundly comforting. In his sterile, cavernous office overlooking the city, Alastair Sterling reviewed the daily reports from Arthur. He read about the relief on Elara's face as she left the doctor's office, about Leo laughing as he bit into a fresh apple, about the eviction notice being taken down from her door. He felt a satisfaction that all his billions had never been able to buy. He was not just moving money around, he was actively mending a small, broken piece of the world. He was healing her, and in doing so, he was beginning to heal himself. He saw her not as a project, but as a kindred spirit, a symbol of the goodness he had thought was lost forever. He knew he couldn't remain a shadow forever. He wanted to see her again, to speak with her, to exist in the same quiet, dignified space she occupied. He wanted to know the woman whose simple, unwavering morality had pulled him back from the brink of total despair. He was ready. Alastair knew that simply appearing at her door with a check would be crass, it would turn his genuine admiration into a transaction, cheapening the very purity he sought to protect. His approach had to be subtle, dignified, a way to bring her into his world without revealing its true, staggering scale. He instructed Arthur to establish a small, unassuming philanthropic entity, the Lily Foundation, named for his daughter. Its public-facing mission would be to provide grants to community arts programs. Its real purpose was to create a safe, quiet place where he could offer Elara a job. A week later, a recruitment agency, supposedly acting on behalf of the foundation's reclusive director, contacted Elara. They had seen her resume online, a detail Arthur had meticulously arranged, and were impressed with her administrative experience from a job she held before Leo was born. They offered her an interview for a position as an executive assistant. The salary they quoted was more than double what she had earned at the diner, with full health benefits. It was another miracle, another piece of an impossible puzzle falling into place. Hope, no longer fragile, began to take root in her heart. She accepted the interview immediately. The address led her to a modest but elegant brownstone in a quiet part of the city, a world away from the gleaming, intimidating skyscrapers of the financial district. Inside, the atmosphere was calm and filled with a soft, amber hue from the lamps. There was no polished marble, no cavernous lobby, just warm wood floors and walls adorned with tasteful, gentle art. She was led to an office where a man stood looking out the window, his back to her. When he turned around, Elara gasped softly. It was him. The quiet, weary man from the diner. He looked different now. The deep sadness was still there in his eyes, but it was softer, tempered by a new, steady intensity. The worn sweater was gone, replaced by a simple but well-fitting dark blue shirt. He was handsome, she realized with a small jolt. He offered a small, gentle smile. "Miss Vance. Thank you for coming. I'm Alastair." He didn't offer a last name. He wanted her to meet the man, not the myth. He hired her on the spot, explaining that the foundation was new and that her primary role would be to help him organize grant applications. The work was peaceful, meaningful. Days turned into weeks. They worked in a comfortable, unspoken harmony, the sterile silence of their shared workspace often broken by his quiet chuckle at a comment she made, or her soft hum as she organized files. They rarely spoke of their personal lives, but a bond of shared gentleness and mutual respect grew between them. One evening, as a thunderstorm raged outside, echoing the storm on the night they first met, they were working late to meet a deadline. Elara noticed a photograph on his desk that he usually kept face down. It was the picture of the beautiful woman and the little girl with bright, innocent eyes. She felt an undeniable pull to ask. "They're beautiful," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper above the pounding rain. "Your family?" Alastair froze, his hand clenching around a pen. He looked at Elara, at her sincere, compassionate eyes, and felt the walls he had so carefully constructed around his heart begin to crumble. His voice was raw when he spoke. "My wife, Amelia. And my daughter, Lily." He told her everything then. The whole shattered story. He told her about the teenager, the illegal drink, the crash, the unbearable silence that followed. "The reason I was in that diner," he finished, his voice cracking, "was because I was looking for a reason not to hate the world. And then I saw you. You stood up to that woman, for that boy. You chose what was right over what was easy. You had no idea, but in that moment, you honored their memory more than anyone ever has." Elara listened, her entire being focused on him, her heart aching with a profound, shared understanding of loss. She didn't offer empty platitudes or say she was sorry for his loss. Instead, she stood, went to the small kitchenette in the office, and made him a cup of tea, just the way she knew he liked it. She placed the warm mug in his trembling hands, her fingers briefly brushing his. The simple, steady gesture of care was more comforting than 1,000 words. Moved by his vulnerability, she found herself sharing her own story, of watching her strong, vibrant husband succumb to a sudden illness, of the crushing loneliness, of her desperate, all-consuming fear for Leo's future. They sat in the dim, flickering light of the office, two souls scarred by grief, finding a quiet, sacred solace in their shared tragedy. When she finished, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle and warm. "You are not alone anymore, Elara," he whispered. And for the first time, she truly believed it. He was her unspoken protector. The Lilly Foundation's inaugural charity gala was the culmination of months of work, an event designed to officially launch their community arts initiative. It was to be held in the grand ballroom of the city's most stately and historic hotel, a place of gleaming marble floors and ornate, glittering chandeliers. Alastair insisted that Elara attend, not as his assistant taking notes in the corner, but as his personal guest, a key member of his team. When she hesitated, citing her lack of an appropriate gown, he simply smiled. The next day, a box arrived at her apartment containing a dress of deep sapphire blue silk. It was elegant and impeccably tailored, beautiful without being ostentatious. It made her feel graceful, strong. Looking at her reflection, she saw not the worn, weary waitress, but a woman of quiet confidence, a woman who was beginning to hope again. When she arrived at the gala on Alastair's arm, she felt a wave of profound disbelief. The cavernous ballroom was filled with the city's elite, women in shimmering gowns and men in crisp tuxedos. The air hummed with polite conversation and the soft clinking of champagne flutes. She felt like an imposter, a fragile bird in a cage of gilded predators. But Alastair's presence beside her was a steadying anchor. He stayed by her side, his hand resting gently on the small of her back, introducing her not as his assistant, but as his esteemed colleague, his voice filled with a sincere, undeniable pride that made her heart flutter. It was in the middle of a conversation with a city councilman that a familiar, venomous voice cut through the air. "Well, well. Look what the cat dragged in." Elara froze. She turned to see Mrs. Delacroix, dripping in diamonds, her face a mask of cruel contempt. Her eyes raked over Elara's dress, her expression souring with disdain. The attack was swift and public. "I must be mistaken," Mrs. Delacroix said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, a circle of curious onlookers already forming. "I thought this was a respectable event. What is a disgraced little waitress doing here? Did you sneak in to steal the silverware, or are you serving the hors d'oeuvres?" The humiliation was a physical blow, sucking the air from Elara's lungs. The councilman shifted uncomfortably. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd. Elara stood pale and trembling, her face flushed with shame, but she held her head high. She would not give this cruel woman the satisfaction of her tears. She kept her back straight, her dignity her only shield against the vicious onslaught. "Surely you can't be so desperate for a date, Alastair," Mrs. Delacroix continued, now turning her venom on him, though she did not yet know who he was. "Bringing this trash into a place like this. It lowers the tone for all of us." Just as Alara felt she might shatter, Alastair stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of her. His movement was calm, almost casual, but it commanded the immediate and total attention of the room. A sterile silence fell over the glittering crowd. He did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. His power was a palpable force, quiet and absolute. "Mrs. Delacroix," he began, his tone dangerously soft, yet it echoed in the vast space. "This woman," he said, turning slightly to gesture toward Alara, his eyes filled with unwavering admiration, "is Alara Vance. And she possesses more integrity, more character, and more grace in her little finger than you have displayed in your entire lifetime." A collective gasp went through the audience. He continued, his gaze pinning the arrogant woman in place. "You may not recognize me without a waiter's apron, but you might recognize my name. I am Alastair Sterling." The name dropped into the silence like a polished stone into a still pond, creating seismic ripples of shock and recognition. He was not just a wealthy guest, he was the Alastair Sterling, the reclusive CEO of Sterling Industries, one of the most powerful and influential men in the country. He was the host of the gala, the sole benefactor of the very foundation they were all there to support. Mrs. Delacroix's face went white, her smug expression melting into one of pure horror. Alastair recounted the incident at the diner, his voice clear and steady, praising Alara's moral courage as an act of profound heroism. "This foundation," he declared, his eyes sweeping the stunned room, "is built on the principle of integrity. It is named for my daughter, who was killed by a drunk driver who was served illegally. Ms. Vance's actions that night were not just lawful, they were sacred." He then turned his cold, commanding gaze back to the now trembling socialite. "Therefore, the Lilly Foundation will no longer be accepting your donations. We do not associate with those who champion cruelty and endanger children for their own convenience." He delivered the final, devastating blow. He took Alara's hand, his grip warm and protective, and addressed the silenced crowd. "In fact, I am honored to announce that I am appointing Ms. Vance to the Foundation's executive board, effective immediately, with a salary and benefits package that reflect her immense value and unwavering moral character." He had not just defended her, he had elevated her, completely and irrevocably reversing the power dynamic, leaving her tormentor utterly speechless and publicly humiliated. Alara looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears, not of shame, but of disbelief, of hope, and of a deep, burgeoning love. He was her savior. The drive home from the gala was wrapped in a profound, unspoken intimacy, the sleek interior of Alastair's car a silent cocoon against the glittering city lights that blurred past the windows. The emotional storm of the evening had passed, leaving a quiet, tender calm in its wake. Alara sat beside him, the sapphire silk of her dress rustling softly with each breath. She was still trying to process the seismic shift that had just occurred in her life. She was no longer a victim, she was a board member. She was no longer alone, she had a powerful, gentle protector. She turned to look at him, at his strong profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Why?" she whispered, the single word holding the weight of 1,000 questions. "Why did you do all of that for me? The job, the money. Tonight. Why?" Alastair pulled the car to a smooth stop in front of her modest apartment building. He turned off the engine, plunging them into a soft, private darkness, the only sound the quiet hum of the cooling engine. He turned to face her fully, his eyes, so often filled with a haunted sadness, were now clear and filled with a raw, undeniable emotion. "Because you saved me first, Alara," he said, his voice thick with feeling. He finally confessed everything. He told her about being the man in the corner of the diner, a ghost of a man hollowed out by grief, searching for a single reason to believe the world wasn't an entirely cruel and meaningless place. He described how her simple act of courage, her refusal to bow to pressure, was like a flare in his endless night. "You didn't know it," he continued, his voice cracking slightly, "but your integrity that night was the first beautiful thing I had witnessed in 2 years. It reawakened my heart. It gave me a purpose again." He told her about the anonymous gifts, the carefully orchestrated job offer, his desperate need to be near the source of that light, to protect it. I know I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid. I was afraid of turning your goodness into a transaction, of tainting it with my wealth. I just wanted to help you, to give you the security you deserved." His confession was a tender, vulnerable thing, stripping away the layers of billionaire and CEO, leaving only a man whose shattered heart was being mended by a woman's quiet strength. "I did it all, Elara," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he reached out to gently cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin, "because somewhere along the way, while watching over you, I fell in love with you. I fell in love with your quiet dignity, your selfless heart, your unwavering spirit." Tears shimmered in Elara's eyes, spilling over and tracing warm paths down her cheeks. She had been falling for him, too, for the kind, gentle, sad-eyed man she knew as Alistair, her quiet boss who made her feel seen and safe. His immense wealth was irrelevant, it was his soul that had captured hers. "I thought," she began, her own voice trembling, "I thought I was just imagining it. The connection between us. I have feelings for you, too, Alistair. More than you know." In the soft, intimate darkness of the car, with the weight of their secrets finally lifted, he leaned in. His lips met hers in a gentle, cathartic kiss, a kiss that was not about passion, but about recognition. It was a promise of healing, a quiet declaration of a shared future. It was the end of their loneliness and the beginning of a profound, soul-deep love. She was safe. 1 year later. The relentless pounding rain and heavy fog had been banished, replaced by the golden glow of a late afternoon sun that streamed through the large, open windows of a beautiful, warm home. This was not Alistair's cold, stately mansion, but their home, a place filled with light, laughter, and the scent of baking bread. In the lush green garden, a little boy with bright, happy eyes chased a soccer ball, his laughter echoing in the soft hush of the idyllic afternoon. Leo, now healthy and strong, his asthma a distant memory, was the picture of innocent joy. His chest no longer rattled with a desperate cough, it expanded with deep, happy breaths. On a comfortable wicker lounge on the patio, Elara and Alistair sat watching him, their hands intertwined. The weary, haunted look was gone from Elara's face, replaced by a serene radiance. She was no longer the virtuous sufferer, but a woman fulfilled, her quiet strength now a source of joy rather than a shield against despair. Alistair, too, was transformed. The hollow grief in his eyes had been filled with a deep, steady warmth. He was no longer the hidden savior, but a present and loving partner and father. His impeccable suits were reserved for board meetings. Here, he wore a simple linen shirt, completely at ease, completely at home. "The new community center broke ground this morning," Elara said, her voice soft and content. As a director of the Lily Foundation, she had spearheaded a new initiative to build safe after-school havens for underprivileged children. "Your daughter's legacy is helping so many people, Alistair." He squeezed her hand, his gaze shifting from Leo back to her. "Our daughter's legacy," he corrected gently. "And your vision is the reason it's thriving. You've given it a heart, Elara. You've given me a heart." Their shared past of unbearable grief had not been erased, but transformed. It was now the foundation of their shared purpose, a deep well of empathy from which they drew their strength to heal others. They had turned their pain into a powerful force for good, building a life of meaning and love on the ashes of their sorrow. Leo, having tired of his game, ran to them, his face flushed with exertion. He climbed into Alistair's lap, holding up a small, hand-picked daisy. "For Mama," he said, his voice pure and clear. Elara took the small flower, her eyes glistening. Alistair wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them into a warm, secure embrace. In this small, perfect moment, the warmth of the sun, the scent of the grass, the weight of her son in his lap, the love of his life by his side, Alistair found the peace that had eluded him for so long. This was not a miraculous, fleeting rescue, this was a deep, enduring reality they had built together. It was security. It was family. It was a happily ever after earned through suffering and sealed with a gentle, selfless love. They were home. Total silence. This story is a testament to a profound and simple truth: a single, unsolicited act of kindness, performed with a pure heart and without any expectation of reward, can send ripples of change into the universe, returning to its source 1,000-fold. Ilara's unwavering integrity in a moment of pressure was not just about refusing a drink to a teenager, it was a powerful declaration that her moral compass was more valuable than her own security. It was this selfless act that pierced through the armor of a shattered man's grief, reminding him that goodness still existed in a world he had come to see as transactional and cruel. Her light did not just illuminate her own path, it guided him out of his darkness. And in return, his resources did not just solve her material problems, his gentle, protective love healed her emotional wounds, giving her the safety and security she and her son so desperately deserved. Their journey reminds us that true wealth is not measured in polished bank statements or ornate possessions, but in the quiet dignity of a person's character and the courage to do what is right, even when it is hard. It is a fable of how two broken souls, brought together by a chance encounter, can mend each other's deepest wounds and build a future far more beautiful than the lives they lost, transforming shared grief into a shared, sacred purpose. If this story of Ilara's unwavering spirit and Alistair's profound redemption touched your heart, and if you believe in the power of quiet courage to change the world, then please help us share this message of hope. The world can often feel dark and unforgiving, but stories like this are a flicker of light, a reminder of the goodness that resides within ordinary people and the extraordinary impact of their choices. We invite you to join our community of viewers who cherish narratives of love, integrity, and the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. Please like this video to show your support, share it with someone who needs an inspiring story to brighten their day, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales for more soul-stirring and heartwarming content that will restore your faith in humanity. We'll see you in the next one.